When I booked today's guest, who is also a friend of mine and a fellow mental health advocate, I had no idea that I would need what she is going to have for us today. Because you see, the last year, we are recording this on July the 15th, 2022. I have had some significant life changes, some good, some bad, all of which pushed me to burnout. Because you see, children who grow up like Marlena and I did with trauma, whose brains never really figured out how to self-soothe and how to self-limit and how to implement boundaries. We don't know anything but go. And go, I've been going. As many of you, as faithful Wednesdays with Watson podcast listeners know, I have gone hard and strong for this Wednesdays with Watson podcast. You are listening to the last episode of season 3. There almost wasn't going to be a season 4, as I absolutely experienced adult burnout in my life. I firmly believe that when I booked Marlena, and this interview has been rescheduled several times, that the timing has been providential because I need to hear what she has to say today. Because the bottom line is that my needs matter too. And while I love providing access to help for you, unless I take care of myself, I can't do that. But the most important thing is, in fact, that we do take care of ourselves. What is the connection between adult burnout and childhood trauma? We're going to talk about it today. Welcome to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. We have many new listeners, so if you're not familiar, my name is Amy Watson and I am your host. I am so excited to bring a good friend of mine back to the podcast today. Marlena is no stranger to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. If you're right there in your app and you scroll down and you see an episode called Remaking Marley, this is my friend Marlena, fellow mental health advocate, just a tremendous human being, loves me with the purest love of all. We are on a podcast speaking with each other 3,000 miles apart. Marlena, welcome back to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast.
Oh my goodness. Hi, Amy. I just got chills. I'm like tearing up. I can't believe it was a year ago. Was it a year ago? Yeah, that we talked. Like doing that's crazy. But I feel so honored. I feel so excited to talk with you, to talk with your listeners and really just get into burnout, especially in adulthood, and just how that relates to the things we went through as kids.
Yeah. And so, guys, we will not be able to cover everything that Marlena talked to me about on that episode called Remaking Marley, which, by the way, is her mental health advocacy. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. And it actually ties in nicely to our subject today. So we won't be able to cover a lot of that. And but I do want to go for the juggler here. And just so listeners know, Marlena knows this. Usually we kind of warm up a little bit, but this is an important topic of adult burnout. And what is the connection for those of us who have childhood trauma? I will give listeners this insight, particularly YouTube listeners who are new to the Wednesdays with Watson podcast. Marlena was one of the first people to bring up to me, you know that you can have significant post-traumatic stress disorder having been brought up in an intact two-parent family. And so that episode that we recorded about a year ago, it was last summer, was Marlena telling us how she grew up in a two-parent family and then absolutely is not okay. And so I am going to go right for the juggler. Marlena, would you mind giving our listeners just a little glimpse into your childhood and that day, and my heart's beating fast and I'm tearing up myself, that day that you decided that life wasn't worth living?
Of course. Yeah. I'll do a very abridged version because there's a lot that happened through my childhood, but my parents always told me they fell in love, they got married, they planned me, which is beautiful. But I grew up with, a mom who had alcoholism and was a bipolar human, and my dad who had his own trauma and alcoholism and all that. And it's pretty bad. Like, I had two parents who themselves needed a lot of love and care, and they couldn't give that to me because they themselves didn't have too much. And there were good parts to it. I'm not saying that, but the absolute important parts of raising a child, being present, loving, patient, all that stuff. I think there's a huge lack that I experienced. I mean, you and I talked about, I had a roof over my head, clothes on my back, food in my belly. So like, I never wanted to believe that what I went through was so bad, because, there are worse situations out there, just as much as there's better situations. But I constantly had to show up and parent one of my parents. I had to make decisions. I had to keep, one of them alive when they tried to overdose. I was a lot of physical abuse as a kid. Like it was bad. And I went off to college. And I remember thinking, when I got dropped off at college and I got in this huge fight with my mom, and she drove off and say goodbye. It was so crappy. But anyways, I remember feeling like, I feel different, but not badly. Is this what not being anxious is like? Is this, so I like had this epiphany of like, oh, I must have been anxious because now I'm not anymore. And it was like such a shift in my brain. And I really think that was like the opening, that was the first rip of all of my wounds, of being like, all right, girl, this is not normal and we need to fix this. In college, to take care of myself, to not depend on my mom, because a lot of times there was like manipulation, whether it be money, whether it be emotion, support, all that. I supported myself. I got an apartment, I worked 3 jobs, I was in nursing school, but of course I wanted to keep up this identity that I was fine, because I was fine, I had everything I needed. So I joined a sorority. I did so much that I was not taking care of myself. I didn't even know what that meant. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was barely passing my classes. On top of it, I was also dealing with a lot of hurtful things from my mom. And I mean, that was things like phone calls threatening that she was suicidal, calls telling me that like I was making all these bad decisions, I was selfish, all this stuff, things you didn't need to hear when you were already doing so much. And it got to a point, there was a week that like I was just so numb, and I kept telling my one roommate, who's my person, she's my best friend, she's such an important human in my life. She's very big in faith, and we talked about that last time.
She's
and
my
then I just
friend.
I told her, can you check on me before bed? Can you just make sure I go to bed every night? I don't know why I told her that. I said, please check on me. And then when the day came, I tried my best to say goodbyes, and I had my attempt. And I just remember this part that's so powerful. I don't know how to explain it very well. I just know that there was this feeling of a presence that was like, this is not it, and we are done here. And there's no shame. It was almost like a parent that was like, enough's enough. I'm gonna take away the stressor. I can't hug you because I'm a weird presence that I can't describe, but you are meant to do more things, and we have to leave the situation. You need to get up off the floor, and you need to go to your bed, and tomorrow's a new day. And I did. And, I said goodbye text right before I tried. And next thing I knew, people were coming in the door. My roommate, best friend, whatever, was like, I will break down this door. You need to open your door right now. And I got up, opened it, and my friends came in, and they laid in bed with me. And the rest is history. That's when I decided, like, my life is for me, and I really need to love and take care of myself. It's so precious.
Yeah. And I just, this was this 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th time that I've heard that story. And I can't imagine a life without you. I can't imagine a planet without you. You mentioned just now that you had all you needed. And if folks go back and listen to that Remaking Marley episode, you talk about how your teeth were rotted because you were eating. You said, yeah, I had food in my stomach, but not really, right? And so I asked you here today because we're going to talk about adult burnout as it is connected to childhood trauma. And ironically, we had an episode with one of our mutual friends, Nicole Patrol, who is a wellness coach, and we talked about the connection between food and mental health, particularly in childhood. And so there are these parts of our brains, and this is true of me too, because I did the same thing, girl. Out of college, I was like, screw all of you people that tried to take me down. I got, I got a degree, and I immediately went to work. And before my 25th birthday, I was running $1 million business, and no one was going to tell me that I couldn't. But what I didn't know is that because I was not nourished, not only by food earlier in my childhood, but because of that trauma that I had and because of the trauma that you have, there is this absolute inability to self-regulate. And so all I knew, all I know is go. And that is true to this day. All I know is go. And I have people in my life, and you just talked about your best friend, and one of the hallmarks of this podcast is community. But I have people who say, Amy, stop. I will absolutely take your computer, your phone, all of it away because you are not okay, because I do not have the ability to do that. And as I mentioned in the cold opening, in the year of 2022, really just I was living in such fear, which is a hallmark of PTSD, that I was going at it with everything I had, including this podcast. I was fielding messages from people who wanted to take their lives. I was having to call wellness checks on people who wanted to take their lives. And I went down in flames, almost to the point where I was telling you pre-interview here that I was Googling psych wards. I didn't want to go back to the one I was in 12 years ago, but I was Googling psych wards. And so I want my listeners to know today. And I got a message from somebody that said, I'm so afraid I'm going to screw up my kid. And I said, look, the very fact that you said that, you're not going to screw up your kid. So parents listening, we want you to understand that we are talking about adult burnout as it pertains to these big adverse childhood experiences that if you've listened to this podcast at all, you know about. We are going to make mistakes with our children, but things that Marlena and I have been through broke, and I air quote when I say that, broke our brain in ways that we don't know when to stop. And Marlena, you said something, there's two words you now know that if you say, it's like a big giant red flag ripped tied on the beach. What are those two words for you?
I'm tired.
Yeah. And you also,
every time.
Yeah, you also said something too. It's like I felt like the little kid that needs a nap. And that was how I was feeling. I felt like a little kid that needed a nap. And so I'm really grateful. I mean, you and I met on a Clubhouse along with a few of our other friends in the summer. I believe it was the summer of 2021. And we held space for people, and we did all the things, and we burned ourselves out there too. But the connection between that lack of brain development when you have experienced childhood development and the go mode, right? That I am just going to go, go, go. And so with that being said, you picked as your vocation a pediatric ER nurse. Okay, I just want to let that breathe for a second. A pediatric ER nurse. I can't think of a more emotional job, a more taxing job than that, particularly over the last couple of years. Can you tell us what motivated you to go into that vocation? Because you could have been any kind of nurse. Why a pediatric ER nurse?
I have people all the time tell me like, oh man, you work with kids, it's so hard, it's so tough, blah, blah. And I don't feel that one bit. Kids are incredible. Kids don't look at things through a lens of like fear because they don't know. And it's my job to show up and help them get from the unknown to the known. None of them have had IVs before. None of them have been this sick before. And I show up and I say, I've got you. And that's so powerful. And because I do that, they also feel like they can get on the other side. There's nothing better than a kid, like when parents are like, oh, they never take medicine. And I'm like, okay. And I do it. And they're like, they've never done that. I'm like, because it's my job to show up and be like, this is what's going to help you. And this is what we're going to do. And let's carry on. And it's powerful to be that in a child's life. I needed that in my life. And I've always known I've wanted to work with children. I've had such an affinity because I needed it. And I understand childhood. I understand needs on such a deep level because I didn't have mine met. And so it's so special for me to show up like that. I do want to say before I forget, we were talking about how parents were afraid about screwing up their kids. And I see parents very vulnerably all the time. I want to say something, and I'm reading this book, How to Do the Work by Nicole. Oh, it's on the book, but she's a holistic psychologist on social media. You can't avoid that, right? Like, we are human. You cannot avoid that part of parenthood. You already being aware of it is so powerful, and I want parents to know that. The things that will go wrong will help your child build resilience, which is important in life. It will encourage them to, go through bad emotions. I think we get in our society so hyped on like happiness and positivity and everything's perfect, and it's not, right? Like, there are hard days as much as there are good days, and there are in betweens. And I need you as a parent to understand, like, all you can do, just like I do when I go to work, is show up and say, I got you, and we got this, and we got to move forward through it. And I'm not saying move forward, like you and I talk about go, go, go. Like, there are times that you and I have learned, like, you need to really sit with it and be like, damn, this sucks. Or like, and I say to kids all the time, I'm like, this is hard. And this sucks. And when I have kids come in that are having a quote unquote psych emergency, I give them Play-Doh. I'm like, you want to throw this on the wall? You need, I give them, balls to throw. I'm like, I'm going to leave the room because I don't want to get hit. Please don't eat this. But, get your energy out. Be pissed. You are allowed those emotions. And it is my job to shepherd you into how you can get them out. And I think that's such a big thing that we missed, you and I as children, on how to cope and how to move through these really big feelings. And that's the most special part of working with children. It's like letting them learn and prosper and grow into who they are meant to be. Oh, I just love it so much.
Well, and it just shows YouTube listeners / watchers see this beautiful person on the other end of this screen that I'm talking to. And you say something that is my favorite. And you said it in the pre-interview that like parents will come in all freaked out because their child has a temperature or whatever. But you say this one word that I love so much. You are safe.
I love saying that to families. I always say, like, coming crying, holding their kid, whatever. And I always look at them first before I assess their child, because I also have to bring my nervous system down 20 more notches, because, you get activated when people are stressed. It's a normal human response. So my job as an ER nurse is to like calm myself down and like see what's actually happening. So I take a deep breath and I look at them to remind them and myself, you are in the safest place you can be. Yeah. You are in a children's hospital. We will do everything we need to do to take care of your child, whether that be Tylenol or whether that be life-saving things. And you just see them go, you're right. You're like, all right, now look, let me see your child. Are they breathing? Give me. You're
in the safest place that you can be. Do you say that to yourself ever?
Well, last summer.
Yes, because you've had a difficult year. So let's talk about that, because we're talking about burnout as it pertains to childhood trauma. So talk to us about the last year, because that's what I want listeners to hear, is that even advocates burn out.
Yeah, it's funny. I know the things and I still do the things. What is the saying? Do as I say, not as I do.
So true.
But last winter I started Remaking Marley. I was like doing really well with it, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go travel nursing. For those of you guys that don't know, as nurses, like, you can take assignments for 3 months at a time and go anywhere in the country. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but that's like the gist of it. So I was like, well, I don't have a lot of money, but I have friends in DC. I was living at Philly at the time, and I was like, oh, I'll just take the train down to DC and I'll take a job there. And I didn't care what the contract said. I was like, I'm just going for the experience. Well, little did I know that working should have been 7 12-hour shifts in a row for the most part at a time, was in a hospital that had high acuity and low resources, what it was going to do to me emotionally. I mean, it's already hard, and this is what brought me, when you had said, anyone understands burnout and childhood trauma, I was like, girl, I think I do, because I'm really good at dealing with chaos and stress and managing people's big emotions. It's why I love what I do. But, I can do that 3 days in a row, and then my first day off, I'm beat. I have to do so much re-regulation after that. Even after work, like when I get in my car now, I take a deep breath. I put on my favorite music, and I just that's like the start of me just trying to re-regulate and get back to my baseline. But yeah, it's 7 days in a row. I burned myself out. I cried every time I did it the last 6-7 day in a row, I would cry all the way walking to work because I was tired because I wasn't meeting my needs.
Yeah.
And I just finally had to be like, enough's enough. I moved back to Philly. I call it putting my tail between my legs. So everyone I talk to is like, Marlena, you did what you needed for yourself. But it felt that way. You know, I took this leap. I sold everything I owned. I gave up my apartment in Philly because I thought I was going on this adventure. And I had to have an honest conversation with myself that this wasn't serving me. And I needed to go back to a place where I felt safe and comfortable. And Philly has become my home in a sense of like, you know, it's crazy. Growing up, I never had a place that felt like home. Like I had my hometown, but like when I left, I was like, all right, this is a chapter I don't need this again. And then, you know, college was its own little bubble, but I never felt somewhere that was like rooted in it. Like when I got there, I got these butterflies. And like every time I go to Philly and I either, you know, especially the airport or the Amtrak, and I see like, welcome to Philadelphia, there's this like wash of warmth over me. It's like when people call me Marley, it's just like so in my bones, so good. So I went back to Philly and I got a special trauma therapist, and we just talked about like how important it is to meet my needs, and that was so unfamiliar to me, right? Because you and I went go, go, go. So nobody had to talk with us as kids, and this is part of us having a lack of safety of knowing what my needs were and how to meet them. Obviously, we know you have to sleep, you have to eat, but to know that what you need is like when you're having a hard day, what do you need? And it's not just like, oh, I need to like sit down and drink some water. No, I need to like, sometimes I gotta just turn my phone off. Sometimes I have a list that I do every day, and I encourage everyone to do this. I got this from some amazing human. Her name's Amy. Oh God, I'm forgetting last names. I'll have to give you it to link it. But she said you should have something called a sacred 6. So every day you have 6 habits you do. And so every day I have 6 things I do. One of them is going outside. One of them is literally just going outside for 30 minutes, whether that be sitting there, walking. I can use that like when I walk to the gym, I check that off my list. Another one for me personally is going to the gym because it's just important, and so on and so forth. So
We'd
some
love to
people
know
have
those 6 if you're willing to share them.
Yeah, it's on my phone. My phone's right here. Great. It's simple things that make you feel good. So like for me, it's like drinking X amount of water, and for some people that might be like not drinking soda. You know, that might just be like, it really does take time to sit and be like, what makes me feel good every day? And so for a week, I kind of took stock of like what behaviors I did. When I do these sacred 6, I am able to show up better for myself. I am able to be a better person, not only for myself, for the people around me. And it's also allowed me to build trust within myself, which again, you and I did not experience that as a kid. In fact, we experienced so much betrayal from the people who were supposed to take care of us that we just assumed we weren't worth being trusted or loved. And so that's where the go, go, go goes, because you don't have to, if you just go, nothing else matters. You just have to like straight run for it.
And the results, we get results, and that makes us feel good, and it perpetuates that terrible behavior.
Yep, exactly. Oh, here it is. So this list gets updated every so often. Outside for 30 minutes, move my body for 30 minutes. And so that can be anywhere from like, literally some days are really hard and I cannot leave my apartment. So I will just stretch on the floor and put on music that makes me feel good. Having a cup of tea. I have a cup of tea every day. It makes me feel so good. Making a meal at home. So that can be as small as like making a smoothie bowl, or as big as like starting pasta from scratch. But like both of those things make me feel good, and it shows me that I'm worth that time and that energy towards myself.
Yeah.
And the like top thing I do, I call it Empress energy, which I guess out loud sounds kind of cheesy, but it's like things that make me feel just like so good in my body, like doing my hair and doing my makeup, and journaling and meditating. Because before this, meditating was one of these and journaling was one of these. And I said, well, I do those enough every day that I know I'll do it. And it's a part of what makes me feel like the badass woman that I am. So I'm going to call it Empress energy.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think what's important to highlight here for those of you listening who have had childhood trauma like Marley and I have, that you understand it's a little bit like pretend you cut your finger. And let's actually go a little bit deeper than that. You're in a really bad car accident, and all you know to do is get to safety, and your body has protected you from the fact that your leg is broken. And so you jump out of the car and you don't feel any of that pain because your brain has gone into protect mode. And so for us, the go, 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 when you have childhood trauma, if you don't address it, and, self-care and all the things, all these woo-woo words are getting a bad rap because there are times people like us and listeners under the sound of my voice who have had childhood trauma, you have to have a sacred six. I do something very simple, something very similar, but not every day, though I'm getting better on that. But as it pertains to my phone, there's a pastor out in California who came up with this about electronics, and it was divert daily. So at least an hour where you don't have your phone on, where that bright light is not popping in your eyes and the information is not coming at you that would crash a computer. Withdraw weekly, a full day where you have your phone away from you. Maybe you have your favorites in case, you got parents that need to get in touch with you or something like that, but withdraw weekly. But then abandon annually. And Marley, I did that a couple weeks ago, and I came home and I was like, I'm not sure I want to get back on social media because it absolutely calmed me down. Because what I want people to understand, and you referenced it just now, we have to take extra steps because we don't get the warning signals. It's like the person with the broken leg getting out of the car. These constant cortisol dumps that come with PTSD and come with trauma somewhat gives us an inability to see the warning signs. That we're drowning. And so you go to DC, and it was an okay experience, but you ended up having to make another move because, like you said, I'm not okay, I'm tired. And so you went back to Philly, and now you're in California, living the dream. You had to, and we talked about on your first episode, and we're going to talk at the end of the episode too about this, about your own mental health advocacy work, Remaking Marley, which sent me on my own journey of taking care of little Amy. You did that for me. You're part of my healing story. And, but you had to even abandon, and I say abandon, that's a bad word. You had to set aside your advocacy work to take care of you.
Yeah.
So proud of you for that.
Thank you. It's hard because you already struggle when you start a project with imposter syndrome, right? And I see you and I see our friend Simone, and you guys are, so good at cranking out things. And I was like, well, I'm not doing enough. And then I'm also exhausted from work and all that. And Remaking Marley is so precious to me that there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to just half do it. I want to do it, want to lean into it. And, I knew that no matter what, if in order for me to do that with my brand, I needed to take care of myself because I am my brand. I am representing the Remaking Marley whole movement that I'm trying to do. And I'm excited. Right now I've been cranking out a bunch of stuff on Canva and notes and stuff. And I'm hoping, originally it was supposed to be June, and then June I moved out to California. So I'm trying to still get settled, and I'm hoping in September to really take off with it again. I have some great ideas and some great thoughts, but I don't know. I did have to put it down though and be like, look, in order to be what I'm saying I am, I have to take care of me because I am my brand. Even if I didn't have Remaking Marley, right? You are your own brand in life.
Right.
You are worth and when I think about brands, I think of they, revisit every 6 months. Is this serving us? What should we change? What should we update? And that should be your life. Is where am I at? Taking stock of it. Where am I at? What is there something I'd like to do more of? Is there something I'm not really happy with? And it's just having those conversations non-judgmentally and being like, what will serve me so that my brand really just holds value? And that's kind of what happened with Making Marley.
Well, and what you did that you shouldn't be able to do, and this is huge for those of us who experience childhood trauma and now live in this world, particularly with inflation at 9.1%. So for those of you who are just burning the candle at both ends out of sheer necessity, there is this really important component for us, for this club, that nobody wants to be a part of, but good luck trying to get us not to take bullets for each other. And then that's those of us that were not safe in childhood, that our brains were literally formed differently than yours. if you did not experience childhood trauma. And so we have to work harder to take care of ourselves. And there's this word awareness. And we have to become aware. And so Marley now knows when I say I'm tired, I know that I've got to put the brakes on and go, okay, I have to take care of me. And because I don't have the normal things that most people have that go, you're doing too much, dude, stop. And it could be a whole other podcast of why we do what we do, right? I get good feelings from doing this podcast, and a lot of times I use it to avoid my own pain, and by helping other people, because it's a diversion. And so this idea of being aware, which is what you were when even though you had friends in DC, you went back to Philly, and then you even made another move out to California. And I think something as simple as not that Philly's not pretty, but the weather itself, and the access to beauty. I've just finished John Eldridge's book called Take Your Life Back, and he talks about beauty hunting. And it could be one of your listeners, it could be one of your sacred sixes. When you go outside, notice something that's pretty. Because when you do that, you become aware. But when Marley was talking about like coming off of a 7-day shift, like this is the third time we rescheduled this interview, all my fault. But when I would ask you dates to do the interview, you would say, okay, I am working 3/12s next week, and so that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I can do it Thursday, and I texted back, okay, let's do it Friday or Saturday, because we need time to decompress. I say it all the time that when your nervous system was activated from almost birth, it's more work to regulate the nervous system. And so when you come home and you get that cup of tea, or you lay down on the floor with music, or you go outside and you beauty hunt, or you move your body, or you drink water, any of these things, that's just bringing us to baseline, right? That's just bringing us to simple baseline. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh my God, yeah. I think about like, for my friends, when they have a hard day, they call their mom, they call their dad, they can, hug someone, whatever. I don't have that luxury. Like so many days on my bad days, I wish I could just call them and be like, because when you call these people, you don't have to explain yourself. You can just call and start crying. And I do have a couple friends like that, but we have a lot of shame over feeling burnt out. We have a lot of shame for not doing enough. But like the not doing enough is such a survival part of our brain, our reptilian brain, saying like, you got to do more because doing more has kept you safe. And like, resting is like weak and lazy and all this other stuff. And I wish on my hard days I could just call my mom. I wish I could just like lean into her and cry. But like, I do that with my friends. But I have to keep in mind too, and I've done this in friendships. Like I used to use my friends for everything. And they're still human too. Like they have to be available for that. Like, and I have my absolute best friend Christina, who like, it could be literally 2 a.m. and I could call her. And granted, there's a time change now, but like she would drop everything for me. And I feel so lucky and fortunate that in my life where I've had so much lack, that she shows up like that. But it's hard. It's hard when you've gone like this for so long to not feel guilty when you're like, I need to just, my body can't do this anymore. So.
Yeah, it's interesting again that you mentioned that, because I will work an 8-hour day, and right now I have a ton of irons and all the fires, and my computer battery will literally be done. Be like, hey, you need to plug me in, because I move around. I don't sit at my desk because I'm just way too. I don't know, something for that, probably related to childhood trauma. But after an 8-hour day, it's summertime, and so it doesn't get dark here until 9:00. And somewhere conditioned in my brain is that if it's light outside, I need to be doing something productive. I need to be sitting. I really I swore that I would die on the hill of not getting on TikTok. Well, I have done that, and so I will work an 8-hour day and get on TikTok. And if you're a TikTok viewer and or content creator, but particularly a viewer, there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And you can find yourself, it's so addictive that TikTok has actually introduced an algorithm that when you've been on there for too long, it'll come on and go, yo, walk away. But my point is I feel like I should actively be doing something. Like laying on the floor after an 8-hour day, if it's still light outside, feels like I'm going to get fired and I don't even have a boss because I am my own boss, right? Or I need to be doing something for the podcast, or I need to answer that person that messaged me, or I need to check in with this person. And I got to a point where I wasn't checking in with anybody over the last year because I couldn't. I didn't have the capacity. I woke up, my body was buzzing all the time. And because and there's a multiplicity of reasons for that that I'm not ready to share in a public forum, but I absolutely almost burned out because it's never good enough, right? I'll do a video for content for Instagram and I notice a wrinkle here or a hair out there or it didn't do the captions properly and I'll stress myself out because it's never good enough. And I have to ask myself, good enough for who?
Yeah.
Good enough for who?
Absolutely.
And so the importance of taking care of ourselves as we move towards the end of this conversation with Marlena, and I really highly encourage you guys to go back, and I am going to link her original episode in here because at some point, and she's getting closer to relaunching that, and I really hope to be able to get myself be in a position, because I think part of Remaking Marley as a podcast would be amazing. Podcasts are all the rage right now, and you're so knowledgeable and so good, and more, and then all of that, Marley, you are empathetic and you care and you understand, and you have this really unique perspective from a medical perspective. You have this unique perspective of, I remember in those clubhouse rooms, no one, even my own counselor, had ever explained PTSD better and in more layman's terms than you did. If you have PTSD at some point, and this is almost a direct quote, if you have PTSD at some point, your safety has been compromised. And so I think of that often. And so those of you under the sound of my voice know that if you, and look, there are many people, particularly women, who never feel like that they should be lying in the middle of the floor listening to Sarah McLachlan sad song. And I look, something like that you just turn on somebody that writes sappy music so that will evoke tears force out of your eyes to get rid of some of that pent up emotional energy, will help us not burn out. It's little tricks of the trade like that. But you will be bringing back that Remaking Marley brand. But you're acting like you need to say something. So the mic is yours.
Yeah. Well, also, sorry, I want to make sure too, because when we first started talking about this, I think you had asked like, what do people? I need someone to talk about career and burnout. So I want to make sure that I do bring some light to that.
Yeah.
I will never forget when my therapist, this was like, I don't know, a couple years ago. Yeah, maybe like it was in 2019. And I had a therapist at the time be like, well, why'd you want to become a nurse? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I started explaining, I was like, I always make the joke, I wanted to be a cop first. And he was like, I wonder why. And I was like, well, because I was the only person in my life that like kept boundaries and had to be the bad guy and like be an adult and be a parent. And then I remember him saying to me, looking at me and going, isn't it ironic you became a nurse? And I said, what do you mean ironic? He's like, all you know is how to be a caregiver.
Yep.
He's like, obviously you became a nurse, but also it's devastating because the parts of you that, get so activated and it's all it's just like how to take care of other people. And I remember sitting there and being like, dang, that's so true. Like every time I show up at work, I'm stepping into the role I've lived my entire life, which is being a caregiver. And don't get me wrong, it feels good. And I think it's why I work with children and not with adults, because I think adults would be a little bit more triggering.
Yeah.
And children are, I just love them. They're just like so amazing and resilient and funny and silly. But I show up and I get activated. And for the most part, I know how to deal with that. I know how to deal with high stress and emotions and all that. I'm very good at it. But I easily can get burned out because it's all I know. And it's all the things that do trigger those wounds within myself of what I've had to go through. So it has been a fine balance of like, this is my purpose. And I've known it since the day I understood that I've gone through trauma. But also I need to make sure that I'm really aware, you talked about awareness, of when this is too much and how to make sure I fill up my cup so much so I can live to my purpose, which is taking care of like vulnerably sick kids. So it's been a dance. There are days, that are really hard to deal with kids screaming all day. And I think back to when I just sat in my room and I cried, and I would like lock the door and try to convince my mom that I wasn't home. I would sit there and cry and tremble, and I think of these kids that do that, and it really does pull at my heartstrings, and sometimes it can be so hard. But to know that I am the adult in their lives that gets them through something hard, some really scary parts of their life, is so rewarding. And so I just have to check with myself, like, how can I do this job, but also nurture myself, because this is all my body has been acclimated to.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and because there's a both and, right? There's a we are the best caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
We are the best people to be mental health advocates, because we know the heart remembers, the brain remembers, and you are able to provide for people, for children, what you did not have. And in my own advocacy work, I'm doing the same thing. I started this podcast because when the pandemic started and my PTSD I thought I was going to lose my career, my business, my house. I thought I was going to be on the streets. None of that logical, if that tells you anything about how damaging trauma is to the brain. None of that was logical. I have a master's of business administration. I would have gotten a job very quickly, but I was certain when the pandemic started that I was going to die of starvation, to the point where, like, I did silly things, which I won't mention here, but it was just, it was all I knew. But in doing that, and the flip and the other side of that is, as we give advice to those of you out there who have had experienced childhood trauma and are probably in caretaking positions, or probably doing something like I'm doing, you're doing something either as a career or in your own time that is other people focused. And that's such an amazing thing, but we have to be aware of when we are not okay. For you, it's when you're tired. I know now, for me, when I know I'm not okay is when the other day, something dropped on the floor. And by the other day, I mean a couple months ago, in the height of my own racing towards burnout, something dropped on the floor, and the words, and it broke. No big deal. The words that came out of my mouth and the rage that came out was, I was like, whoa. And at the time, I was doing some work with an Enneagram coach who said, okay, I told her that story. She said, there's something much bigger at play there. And what I found is that because I don't know how to self-regulate, I was burning myself out. And so I began to be aware of, okay, when I drop something and words that I never use come out of my mouth, or if I'm yelling at somebody, or if I'm being rude to somebody in public, it's just so much that's not me. I know that the yellow flags are waving, and I've got about 24 hours before it's a red flag. And then I have, about another 24 hours before it's a rest in peace flag. I really know that. I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say that. But for me, my version of I'm tired is not being able to eat. So I'll feel like I've just eaten Thanksgiving dinner, and I will not be able to get calories and food into my body. And I know that that's the time to press the brakes, to put everything aside, including, I don't care whether anybody listens to my podcast today because I haven't put something on social media, or I really need to reach out to that friend who reached out to me, but right now I can't. You know why? Because I'm worthy. I'm worthy of taking care of myself. I'm worthy of there's a song by Maverick City, and the lyrics go, I've never been more loved than I am right now. It doesn't take a trophy to make you proud, but I've never been more loved than I am right now, because I know that I'm loved by the God of the universe, whether I ever do another podcast, whether I ever answer another DM to help somebody, because he loves me, he loves you, he loves all of us so much that it doesn't matter whether we perform. But I do think a lot of survivors of childhood trauma are service-based, service-oriented people. And so I hope that this podcast today has spoken to those of you who need to put some parameters in place, whether it's a friend, whether it's your community, whether it's your church. You need to put some parameters in place. And I call them 2 a.m. friends. And it's simple stuff. Like you said today to me in the pre-interview, wow, Amy, you look just so relieved because the last year has just been so stressful. But I've got friends that'll look at me and go, you haven't eaten today, have you? Just by looking at me, dark circles under my eyes, all of the things. Get you some of those people, because unless the part of your story that God is telling is a complete healing. You are going to struggle to self-regulate, but being aware of it is a simple step. So we're not asking you to do quantum physics when we ask you to take care of yourself. We're just asking you to be aware. How do I know when I'm outside of the gutter of what's good for me? And so I think that you make some good points there. Now let's transition just for a second, because I do have a surprise for you today, as it pertains to Remaking Marley. Many people know, and if you are new to the podcast, you know that this is a podcast that is not monetized. You will not hear advertisers on these podcasts. I did have a few early on, but we raised some money at the end of last year, 2021, through merchandise and through a Facebook campaign. I happen to have a December birthday, so when Facebook does that, hey, for my birthday, this is what I want. We raised some money, and I turned 50 in December. And I had this goal. It's like I heard the voice in my head that said, Amy, you want to raise $1 million to help people who cannot afford counseling, because counseling is a big part of this podcast. It's a big part of my story. It's a big part of your story. But there are so many people out there who cannot afford to go to counseling. And so what we are doing with that money that we've raised, and you are the last one of 2022, we are awarding scholarships in the name of mental health advocates, and the very first one was the one that drove me to the psych ward, but you were the fourth of four, our friend Simone being one of the other ones. And we will award the Joel 225 Ministries, which is will be the newly formed 501c3 scholarship to Remaking Marley. And if you come across someone that needs help and can't afford it, I want you to call me. That money will be set aside for that person. And that is a gift from the Wednesdays with Watson listeners. And so listeners out there, if you're listening, that is the purpose of this podcast. While I love educating you and I love talking to friends and therapists and providing access to help for you, things like the Enneagram that we did, nothing makes me happier than to be able to award these scholarships to world changers. And so Marley, you have that money set aside for the first person that you come across that needs a counseling session. We can't do a lot right now. We're a long way from $1 million. But we're going to do it. And anybody that knows me out there knows that if anybody can do it, because there are not terrible things about go mode that you and I have. It has served me very well professionally, and it will serve me very well this way. I will raise $1 million unless I die tomorrow for counseling. So congratulations to my sweet, sweet friend. I love you so much. And I want you to know that I'm always a text away. And I want to, I think now that my life has calmed down a little bit, maybe I can help you get a podcast off the ground. I think you getting behind a microphone would be amazing. And so we'll talk a little bit more offline about that. But congratulations for the last scholarship of 2022. I can't think of a more worthy person. I'm so proud of you. Because what a lot of people don't know is you don't particularly, and I don't want to get into this conversation on this podcast, but this money isn't for people that just believe like I do 100%. This isn't for people of faith. These scholarships are for people who care and people who advocate for those who can't fight for themselves. And so congratulations. I hope to be able to award it to you every year. And I can't think of a better person for that. And so I will give you the mic. You can take us out. And thank you so much for being here.
Amy, thank you. I have literally goosebumps everywhere. Just how special, how incredible it is that our paths crossed. I feel grateful. I feel so full, so warm, so fuzzy that I have you in my corner. And, we both really understand good days, bad days, and we're here for each other through all that. So thank you. I'm excited. It's going to give me a little fire to get Remaking Marley started back up so I can find some amazing people who need some help and award that to them. So thank you so, so, so much.
Well, it is my pleasure. And so, guys, as we exit out, if you are interested in donating to the podcast, there are a couple ways you can do that. But just click on the Contact Amy button at the very top of the show notes. There, you can either do that through Patreon or something called Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. No amount is too small. We will be rolling out some merchandise with the new season as well. Marley is the last episode before the new season. And so here is also where we are introducing season 4, Forgiving Trauma Makers. And that is something that we're excited to dive into as we go into season 4. So thank you again, Marley, for being here. Marley, I am going to proclaim over you the same thing that I proclaim over everybody. I don't leave a microphone. I don't leave a keyboard without saying these words. I believe it with every fiber of my beating heart. You are seen, you are heard, you are known, you are loved, and you're so, so valued. And I'm so honored to be part of your life. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amy. Love you.
Okay, love you. Okay, guys, we'll be back in 2 weeks with the brand new season of Wednesdays with Watson, Forgiving Trauma Makers. If you haven't already, right there when you're in your app, subscribe. It's free. And so when the episodes drop, it'll drop on your phone. And until then, y'all take care.